I'm continuing to get the engine back in the car, and I spent yesterday pretty much all day working underneath the car. So I've been up bell housing. Bell housing bolts are all in and torqued. The starter motor connections are all made. The flex plate is torqued to the torque converter with torque to spec with blue Loctite on all the bolts. One of the things I did on this job was I was worried about the catalyst, so we pulled the catalyst out, and I showed you pictures of that it looks all right, that it didn't look melted or anything. But when we took the catalyst out, all the bolts broke. So I spent time drilling out flanges and tapping or pulling out the old threads of the old bolts, and everything now has new bolts. There was one that was already broken off that has a nut on the back side of it because they had drilled that one way oversized and in some previous repair. Everything's got a coat of this Permatex anti-seize on the bolts. Hopefully I don't take these bolts out for a long time, but figured it was a good measure. So now the exhaust system is all connected. I had to get a new that clamp sticking down for the air pump air tube that comes down here, clamps to the pipe and comes all the way down. This is the one that feeds from the AIR pump and puts air into the middle of the catalyst. The Y pipe is connected to the engine again. It was down also, of course. So now I have the full exhaust system installed. I'm going to move back up to the top and start working on valve covers, intake, and the top side today. Got a couple of comments here as I start working on some more on this job. One of the biggest challenges is staging. This car is put together in a pretty complex manner, and so what I've learned is, now that this is my second time through, certain things here in the back on the front of the dash get blocked as you build up the engine. So if you have the intake manifold with all the runners on it for the tuned port, it's really hard to get valve covers off, particularly because this tube for the catalytic converter air pump sticks up over the top of it. So right now I've got that installed, but because the intake manifold isn't on, I can still get the valve covers stuck on. So I'm going to do it in that order, put the valve covers on, and then the intake. Also, as you bring things together and the valve covers get tall, it's harder to reach things in the back. So I've torqued up things on the back of the head. The grounds are torqued. That tube is torqued. This tube is for the heater system and sneaks in behind the engine and has an elbow hose like that. And so right now that's easier to reach than it's going to be after everything's built and after all the accessories are in. So I'm going to snake that through next and get that in place. So I'm going to do that, then the valve cover. Oh, and one other one is the oil pressure sender. The oil pressure sender on this engine is twofold. One is there's a sensor for the gauge, and one is a switch for the fuel pump and for the ECM. This threads in back here. It'll come apart one more level, but I should have enough room to swing it, to screw it in. But this gets trapped by the intake manifold. If you don't put this in first, once the intake's on, you'll have a really devil of a time ever installing that. So I need to do that one. So it'll be valve cover, heater plug, valve cover on the other side, oil fittings, and then I'm going to get lined up to install the lower part of the intake. I had to take the fuel injectors off to get clearance for my torque wrench to be able to bolt everything down. But I'm getting close there. Also note that this engine's got a lot of interesting things, like many of the fasteners on the engine are 9/16, and I have a wide selection of 9/16 inch wrenches that I've gathered over the years, and I will tell you that those are excellent. And I can't find, oh here it is. And I have this one, which is a ratcheting end one. It's one of the most useful wrenches on this engine, because when it comes to getting bell housing bolts, you can take this down inside and you can get the top bell housing bolts with this, even if the intake's in there. But with a combination of offsets of 9/16, you can connect most of the things, or disconnect most of the things on the engine, as well as your normal sockets and extensions. But these have been lifesavers, and the ratcheting one in particular. If you don't have one of those to work on one of these cars, I'd say go find them, because a ratcheting end wrench with a flexible end on it, and the blue tape keeps that end from, it's broken right now, but it kind of keeps it from flexing too far. It puts a little stiffness in it so that when you're reaching down in behind you can kind of set it at an angle and torque. And I think that's it for right now. I'm going to go through what I just said, try to get those things together. Alright, I'm ready to set the intake manifold in. I've followed the book, and it says to use the high-tack adhesive on the intake gaskets and stick them down in several spots. I did the ends at the coolant ports, and in the center I've got the RTV down, so I need to get moving. Bolts, torques, everything are lined up. I'm going to go set it in place. She's down. Now I gotta start putting some bolts in it. And these bolts need to have some sealer on them. They go into the water jacket, so we give them a little bit of a dose here. In this back corner, there's a bracket that holds the solenoid. As I recall, it's the EGR solenoid. So that guy sits like that. I also did put a little bit of brush-on gasket sealer around ports on the manifold, just a very, very fine amount. I think these Felpro gaskets are supposed to seal without any sealer, but there's a little bit of porosity in that aluminum, and it just makes me nervous that it could leak. So it was more to fill the pores in the aluminum than anything. And I mean, the last set didn't leak. It leaked in the block where the block had a crack, but there was no coolant coming out from up above. The book has a pattern for snugging and a pattern for torquing. So right now I'm just sort of getting them to close to finger tight. And then I've got 4 more over here on the other side. There's a bracket also that goes on the front. One of the accessories, I believe it's the air conditioning connects to. So we got to make sure we get that one too. The vacuum hose for it hooks up to the plenum. Now the book is kind of interesting because it gives you a snug pattern, but the snug pattern doesn't go to all the bolts. The snug pattern only goes to 6 of the bolts, and then the others are blank, and I don't know if that was a misprint or what, but bolt snugging process is right here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to go around those a second time just to make sure they're close. And beyond that, I'm going to just bring those up with just a silly touch. Alright, they're just brought up. Now, we'll go through the tightening sequence. I'm going to try to do it one time. See how that works. I don't need the second shot. Got my big wrench here. These are supposed to be 25 to 45 foot-pounds. I'm going to set to 40. We'll see how we do. They want me to start here. Just do a check. Make sure these are all okay. check on a couple things and get the fuel injectors.